The fluorescent lights hummed overhead in courtroom 3B of the Oakland County Family Court, casting harsh shadows across the worn wooden benches. It was 9:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in late September, and the air conditioning struggled against the unusual heat that had settled over Michigan. The room smelled of old paper, floor polish, and the faint scent of someone's coffee, forgotten and growing cold on the bailiff's desk. Judge Martha Rodriguez adjusted her reading glasses and glanced at the clock for the third time in as many minutes. In her 23 years on the bench, she had presided over more than 4,000 cases. She had seen bitter divorces that destroyed families, custody battles that left children as collateral damage, and domestic violence cases that made her question humanity itself. She considered herself unshakable, a woman who had built walls around her emotions because this job demanded it. But nothing had prepared her for Elijah Bennett. The heavy courtroom doors creaked open, and the room collectively held its breath. Sarah Bennett entered first, her thin frame seeming even smaller under the weight of what she carried. Her blonde hair, once meticulously styled according to her Facebook photos, now hung limp around her face. Dark circles rimmed her eyes, the kind that spoke of countless sleepless nights and tears that had long since run dry. She wore a simple blue dress, professional but affordable, and clutched a tissue that had been twisted into a damp knot. Behind her walked the victim advocate, Jennifer Martinez, a woman in her 50s who had guided hundreds of families through the nightmare of the court system. Jennifer's hand rested gently on the shoulder of the small figure beside her. Elijah Bennett was 3 years and 4 months old. He stood exactly 36 inches tall and weighed 28 pounds, statistics that Dr. Rebecca Chen had carefully documented during their sessions. He wore tiny jeans and a red t-shirt with a cartoon dinosaur on the front, the kind of cheerful clothing that seemed cruelly ironic given the circumstances. In his arms, he clutched a brown teddy bear that had seen better days. One of its button eyes hung by a thread, and its fur was matted from being held too tightly for too long. But it was Elijah's eyes that stopped everyone cold. They were blue, should have been bright and curious, should have sparkled with the wonder that 3-year-olds possessed in abundance. Instead, they were vacant, hollow. They stared straight ahead at nothing in particular, as if the little boy had learned to look without seeing, to be present without actually being there at all. Judge Rodriguez felt her carefully constructed walls crack just slightly. Detective Mark Stevens stood near the door to the judge's left, his posture alert but relaxed, the stance of someone who had spent 15 years in law enforcement and knew how to read a room. He was 42, built like someone who still hit the gym regularly, with close-cropped brown hair showing the first hints of gray at the temples. His uniform was crisp, his badge polished, and his expression carefully neutral. Beside him sat Bruno. The German Shepherd was 7 years old, 85 pounds of muscle, intelligence, and training. His black and tan coat gleamed under the fluorescent lights, and his dark eyes tracked every movement in the courtroom with the focus of a professional. Bruno had been Stevens' partner for 5 years. They'd been through SWAT situations, drug busts, and enough dangerous calls to fill a book. The dog knew hand signals, verbal commands in both English and German, and could detect 12 different types of narcotics. His record was impeccable. He sat perfectly still now, a model of discipline, though his ears twitched slightly at every sound. Stevens had been surprised when he got the call for courthouse duty. Bennett custody hearing, the lieutenant had said. Father made threats during the last session. We need K-9 presence for security. It wasn't unusual. Stevens and Bruno had done courthouse security before, but something about this case had stuck with him when he read the file. Domestic violence, child witness, selective mutism. That last term had made him pause. 6 months of complete silence from a child who had once been, according to his preschool teacher's statement, the chattiest little guy in class. Across the courtroom at the defense table sat Marcus Bennett. He was 34, wearing a suit that looked borrowed or bought specifically for court. His lawyer, a public defender named Gerald Hutchins, sat beside him reviewing notes. Marcus's expression was carefully arranged into something meant to convey remorse, but his eyes, when he glanced toward his son, held something else entirely. Resentment, maybe, or calculation. Sarah Bennett took her seat in the gallery, 3 rows behind the prosecutor's table. She couldn't tear her eyes away from Elijah, who stood motionless beside Jennifer Martinez. Every mother in that courtroom understood the agony on Sarah's face, the desperate need to scoop up her child and run, to protect him from everything, to turn back time to before that night 6 months ago. The night everything shattered. "All rise," the bailiff announced, though Judge Rodriguez was already seated. The formality of it felt absurd. They were here to discuss a 3-year-old's future, to dissect his trauma in legal terms, to determine whether supervised visitation would resume or parental rights would be terminated. Judge Rodriguez's eyes moved from the case file to the small boy. Elijah hadn't moved, hadn't looked around, hadn't made a sound. She had read Dr. Chen's report 3 times. Selective mutism triggered by traumatic event. The child communicates through nodding and shaking his head occasionally, but refuses to vocalize. Multiple therapy sessions with minimal progress. Drawings indicate severe anxiety and fear responses. The judge had also read the police report from that February night. Officers responding to neighbors' calls of screaming. Sarah with visible injuries. Elijah found in the bedroom closet, unharmed physically but catatonic with shock. Marcus arrested on the scene, combative and intoxicated. And then silence. 6 months of Elijah's absolute silence. Jennifer Martinez gently guided Elijah toward the child-friendly waiting room adjacent to the main courtroom. As they passed within 10 feet of Detective Stevens, something unexpected happened. Bruno's head turned. It was subtle, the kind of movement that only Stevens would notice after years of partnership. The dog's ears pricked forward, his focus shifting from general surveillance to something specific. His nostrils flared slightly, and a barely audible whine, so soft it was almost imagined, escaped his throat. Stevens' hand tightened imperceptibly on the leash. Bruno was tracking Elijah. The little boy didn't notice. He walked past, clutching his teddy bear, his small sneakers making no sound on the courtroom floor. But Bruno's eyes followed him with an intensity that Stevens recognized, the same look Bruno got when he detected something important, when he sensed something others couldn't. "This court is now in session," Judge Rodriguez announced, forcing her voice into its usual authoritative tone. "We're here regarding case number 2024 FC 8847, Bennett v. Bennett, custody and visitation hearing." As the lawyers began their opening statements, as Sarah Bennett fought back tears, as Marcus Bennett sat with his false mask of contrition, nobody in that courtroom knew what was about to unfold. Nobody knew that in less than 2 hours, in a small waiting room down the hall, the impossible would happen. Nobody knew that a dog with an unexplainable gift would succeed where doctors, therapists, and desperate love had failed. Nobody knew that Elijah Bennett was about to speak his first words in 6 months. And nobody could have predicted that those words, 2 simple syllables whispered to a German shepherd, would change everything. The miracle was waiting just down the hall. February 14th started like any other Tuesday. Sarah Bennett dropped Elijah off at Little Learner's preschool at 8:30 a.m., watching as her chatty 3-year-old ran to the toy bin, already talking excitedly about the Valentine's Day party planned for that afternoon. "Mama, we gonna have pink cookies," he'd shouted, his voice carrying across the classroom. "Miss Amy said so." Sarah had smiled, blowing him a kiss. She couldn't have known it would be the last time she'd hear that carefree voice. The day wore on normally. Sarah worked her shift at the hospital where she was a medical receptionist. Marcus was supposed to be job hunting. He'd been laid off from the construction company 3 weeks earlier, and the tension at home had been building like a pressure cooker. Money was tight. Arguments were frequent, but Sarah kept telling herself it would pass. They'd been together 6 years. They'd get through this rough patch. She picked Elijah up at 5:15 p.m. He bounced to the car with a construction paper heart he'd made, covered in glitter and stickers. "For you, Mama." The Valentine was lopsided and perfect. "I love you this much." He stretched his little arms as wide as they would go. "I love you more than all the stars," Sarah had replied, their usual exchange. At home, Marcus was on the couch, beer bottles already accumulating on the coffee table. The apartment smelled sour. He barely looked up when they entered. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. She recognized the signs. The slack expression. The particular glaze in his eyes that meant he'd been drinking since noon. "Daddy," Elijah ran over, holding up his Valentine. "Look what I made." "Not now." Marcus's voice was flat, dismissive. Elijah's face fell, but he tried again, that persistent optimism of childhood still intact. "But Daddy, it has glitter. See the—" "I said not now." Marcus's voice rose sharply. Sarah quickly intervened. "Hey, buddy, why don't we go make dinner? You can help me make spaghetti." She scooped up Elijah, redirecting him toward the kitchen, trying to defuse the situation before it escalated. For the next hour, things seemed okay. Elijah stood on his step stool, helping by stirring the sauce with his plastic spoon while Sarah actually cooked. He chattered constantly, as 3-year-olds do, jumping from topic to topic. "Miss Amy has a cat named Whiskers. Can we get a cat or maybe a dog? Dogs are nice. Tommy has a dog. His name is Max. Max is brown. I like brown." The sound of bottles clinking came from the living room. Sarah's anxiety spiked. She knew she should take Elijah to her mother's house, should pack a bag and leave before nightfall, but she was tired of running, tired of drama. She convinced herself it would be fine. It wasn't fine. Dinner was silent except for Elijah's chattering. Marcus ate mechanically, opening another beer. Sarah tried to make conversation, tried to ask about his day, but got only grunts in response. After dinner, she ran Elijah's bath while Marcus retreated to the bedroom. "Mama, can we read 3 stories tonight?" Elijah asked as she scrubbed shampoo through his hair. "Maybe 2, sweetie. It's getting late." "But Mama—" A crash from the bedroom made them both jump. Sarah's heart hammered. "Stay here," she told Elijah, wrapping him quickly in a towel. "Play with your bath toys. I'll be right back." She found Marcus throwing her things, her jewelry box contents scattered across the floor. "Where is it?" he demanded. "Where's what?" "The money. I know you're hiding money from me." "Marcus, there is no money. We're broke, you know that." The argument escalated quickly, as arguments in that apartment had been doing for months. Voices raised. Accusations flew. Sarah's voice climbed in desperation, trying to reason with someone beyond reason. Marcus's voice turned cruel, then threatening. From the bathroom, Elijah heard everything. The little boy clutched his dinosaur towel, water dripping onto the tile floor, his eyes wide with confusion and fear. What happened next occurred in fragments, the way trauma splinters memory into sharp, disconnected pieces. A neighbor, Mrs. Chen from 3B, heard the screaming. She called 911. Elijah, frightened by the yelling, got dressed in his pajamas and ran toward his parents' voices because he didn't know what else to do. "Mama!" His small voice was swallowed by the shouting. He saw his father's hand connect with his mother's face. He saw his mother fall. He saw blood. "Mama!" The scream tore from his throat. Marcus turned, his face twisted into something unrecognizable. "Get back to your room." But Elijah was frozen, his 3-year-old brain unable to process what his eyes were seeing. His mama on the floor, the red on her face, the monster wearing his daddy's skin. Sarah scrambled up despite the pain exploding through her cheekbone. "Run, baby. Go to your room." Elijah ran, but not to his room, to the only place that had ever felt truly safe. The closet in his bedroom where winter coats hung low and created a cave-like darkness. He burrowed behind them, clutching his teddy bear, the one his grandmother had given him, the one that smelled like home and safety. He heard his mother crying, heard more crashing, heard voices he didn't recognize, adult voices, authoritative voices. Then came the sirens. Red and blue lights flashed through the bedroom window, painting the closet walls in alternating colors. Heavy footsteps, radio chatter. Police, open the door. Elijah pressed himself further into the corner, making himself as small as possible. His heart hammered so hard he thought it might break through his chest. His teddy bear's button eye pressed against his cheek. Officer Jennifer Walsh found him 20 minutes later after they'd arrested Marcus and the paramedics were treating Sarah. "Hey, sweetheart," she'd said softly, kneeling by the closet. "You're safe now. Can you come out?" Elijah stared at her with those wide blue eyes. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. "It's okay, honey. Your mama's okay. She's asking for you." Still nothing. Elijah's lips moved soundlessly, trying to form words that wouldn't come. Something in his mind had shut down, a circuit breaker flipped by trauma, protecting him the only way it knew how. Officer Walsh gently lifted him from the closet. He didn't resist, but he didn't help either. He was rigid in her arms, clutching his bear, his eyes fixed on something no one else could see. Sarah, her face already swelling, reached for him with shaking hands. "Baby, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Elijah buried his face against her neck, but he didn't speak, didn't cry, didn't make a sound. The emergency room doctor checked him over. "No physical injuries," she reported, "but I recommend immediate psychological evaluation. This level of shock in a child this young." That was the night Elijah Bennett's voice disappeared. In the days that followed, everyone tried. Sarah spent hours holding him, singing lullabies, reading stories, begging him to say something, anything. "Please, baby, just one word. Tell Mama you're okay." His grandmother tried with ice cream bribes and silly faces. His preschool teacher tried with his favorite toys and songs. Dr. Rebecca Chen, recommended by Child Protective Services, tried with play therapy and gentle coaxing. Elijah would nod sometimes, shake his head occasionally, but speak never. 6 months passed. 183 days of silence from a child who once narrated every moment of his life. 183 days of watching Sarah's heart break a little more each time she asked a question that went unanswered. The doctors had a term for it: selective mutism secondary to acute trauma. The prognosis was uncertain. Some children recovered in months, others took years, some never fully recovered at all. What nobody knew, what nobody could have predicted, was that the key to unlocking Elijah's voice wouldn't be found in a therapist's office or a mother's loving arms. It would be found in the unconditional acceptance of a German shepherd named Bruno. But that miracle was still hours away, waiting in a courthouse hallway on a September morning that would change everything. Detective Mark Stevens never planned on becoming a K-9 handler. In fact, during his first 12 years with the Oakland County Police Department, he'd actively avoided it. Dogs were unpredictable, he'd thought. Give him a human partner any day, someone he could communicate with using actual words. Then came the warehouse incident in the winter of 2019. Stevens and his partner, Detective Linda Ramirez, were pursuing a suspect wanted for armed robbery. The chase led them into an abandoned industrial complex on the east side, 3 stories of rusted metal, broken glass, and countless hiding places. They'd split up to cover more ground, maintaining radio contact. Stevens was clearing the 2nd floor when he heard Ramirez scream. He found her on the ground, the suspect standing over her with a metal pipe. Stevens drew his weapon, shouted commands, but the suspect wasn't backing down. The situation was escalating toward lethal force when something dark and fast came flying through a broken window. K-9 Officer Bruno, who'd been searching the perimeter with his handler, Officer Jake Morrison, had heard the commotion and made the decision himself. The dog took the suspect down with textbook precision, no excessive force, just enough to neutralize the threat and save Ramirez's life. Stevens had been in awe. Dogs don't just make tactical decisions like that, he'd said later. Jake Morrison had laughed. Bruno does, he's special. 3 months later, Morrison retired after 30 years of service. Bruno, only 4 years old at the time, needed a new handler. I want Stevens, Morrison had told the lieutenant. That dog saved his partner. They've got a connection. Stevens protested. I don't know anything about K9 handling. You'll learn, Bruno will teach you. And he did. Over the next 3 years, Stevens discovered that being a K9 handler wasn't just about commands and training exercises. It was about trust, partnership, understanding that sometimes your partner communicated with body language instead of words, and that was okay, maybe even better. Bruno was extraordinary from the start. He'd graduated top of his class from the K9 Academy in Detroit, mastering narcotics detection, tracking, and apprehension work. His success rate was phenomenal, a 97% accuracy rate on drug searches, dozens of successful tracks, and not a single excessive force complaint in his entire career. But it was the unofficial moments that revealed Bruno's true gift. The first incident happened during a routine traffic stop that went sideways. Stevens had pulled over a vehicle for expired tags and discovered the driver had outstanding warrants. As Stevens arrested the man, he noticed a 5-year-old girl in the backseat, crying hysterically as her father was handcuffed. Protocol said Bruno should remain at Stevens' side, maintaining security, but the dog had other ideas. Bruno pulled toward the patrol car where the little girl sat. Stevens, trusting his partner's instincts, allowed it. The German Shepherd approached the open car door slowly, his body language soft and non-threatening. He laid down on the pavement beside the car and simply looked at the child. The crying stopped almost immediately. The little girl, still sniffling, reached out a tentative hand. Doggy. Bruno's tail wagged once. Permission granted. The girl touched his fur and something magical happened. She stopped crying completely. By the time Child Protective Services arrived 20 minutes later, she was telling Bruno all about her stuffed animals, her voice calm and steady. How'd you do that? The CPS worker asked Stevens, amazed. I didn't, Bruno did. The second incident was even more dramatic. A 7-year-old autistic boy named Tyler Matheson went missing from his backyard during a family barbecue. The search mobilized quickly. Stevens and Bruno were called in for tracking. They picked up the scent trail leading into the woods behind the subdivision. The search lasted 4 hours. It was July, brutally hot, and everyone was terrified they'd find a body. The trail led deep into dense forest where a neurotypical child might not have ventured, but Tyler's autism meant he processed fear and danger differently. Bruno tracked relentlessly, nose to the ground, pulling Stevens through brambles and across a creek. Then, suddenly, the dog stopped. His ears pricked forward, his body tense but not in the way it got when tracking suspects. Stevens listened, heard nothing but cicadas and rustling leaves. Bruno whined that soft, almost questioning sound and changed direction, moving off the scent trail. Stevens followed, confused. You don't abandon a track. That was Rule 1. But Bruno seemed certain. He led them to a small clearing where Tyler sat under a fallen log, rocking back and forth, his hands over his ears, clearly in sensory overload. He was making no sound, which was why the search teams had missed him. Here's what amazed Stevens. Bruno shouldn't have been able to detect a silent, stationary child from that distance. The scent trail had gone another direction, but somehow the dog knew. Bruno approached Tyler with that same gentle body language he'd used with the crying girl. He laid down 3 feet away and waited. Tyler, trapped in his own world, initially didn't notice, But slowly his rocking decreased. His hands came away from his ears. He looked at the dog. "Nice dog," Tyler whispered, his first word since disappearing. Bruno inched closer. Tyler reached out. And just like that, the connection was made. When the rescue team arrived, they found Tyler with his arms wrapped around Bruno's neck, calm and responsive. "I don't understand," the boy's mother sobbed with relief. "He doesn't do well with animals. He usually screams around dogs." Stevens had no explanation. "Bruno's different." After that incident, Stevens started paying closer attention. He noticed how Bruno reacted around children, especially scared or traumatized kids. The dog's entire demeanor changed. His professional, all-business attitude softened into something almost therapeutic. His eyes became gentler, his movements more deliberate and careful. "It's like he can sense their fear," Stevens told his wife Marie over dinner one night. "Not fear of him, fear in general, like he can feel their pain and wants to help." Marie, a veterinary nurse, had nodded thoughtfully. "There are therapy dogs trained for that, but Bruno's a patrol dog. He shouldn't have that skill set." "I know, but he does." Stevens started researching. He learned about facility dogs, specially trained animals that worked in hospitals, courthouses, and crisis centers, providing comfort to traumatized individuals. He read studies about how dogs could lower cortisol levels, reduce anxiety, and create feelings of safety that humans sometimes couldn't replicate. He also learned something fascinating. Some dogs, regardless of training, seem to possess an innate ability to detect emotional distress. Scientists theorized they could sense changes in human biochemistry, stress hormones, elevated heart rates, even the subtle shifts in body language that indicated psychological pain. Bruno, Stevens realized, was one of those rare dogs. His tactical training made him an excellent police K9, but his natural empathy made him something more. The third incident cemented Stevens' understanding of his partner's gift. They were called to a domestic disturbance where a 2-year-old had witnessed her mother's assault. The toddler was catatonic with shock, unresponsive to paramedics' attempts to assess her. Bruno, again breaking protocol, approached the child. He placed his head on her lap, that same gentle gesture, and waited. 5 minutes passed. Then the little girl's hand moved to touch his fur. 10 minutes later, she was crying, finally releasing the trauma. 15 minutes later, she was responsive enough for medical treatment. The paramedic had stared at Stevens in disbelief. "I've seen therapy dogs. This is beyond that." Stevens had simply nodded, his hand resting on Bruno's head. "Yeah, he's special." Now, standing in the courthouse hallway on this September morning, Stevens watched Bruno's ears track the small boy being led to the waiting room. That familiar tension in his partner's body language. That focus that had nothing to do with threats or suspects. Bruno sensed something about Elijah Bennett. Stevens didn't know what yet. Didn't know that in less than an hour, his extraordinary partner would do what therapists, doctors, and desperate love couldn't. Didn't know that Bruno's unexplainable gift was about to change a little boy's life. But he trusted his dog. After 3 years of partnership, Stevens had learned that when Bruno sensed something, it mattered. "Easy boy," he murmured, though Bruno needed no steadying. The dog was perfectly behaved, perfectly professional. He was just waiting for his moment. And that moment was coming. The morning sun filtered through the courthouse windows, casting long rectangles of light across the marble floors. Sarah Bennett arrived at 8:15 a.m., 45 minutes before the hearing. She couldn't sleep anyway. Hadn't slept properly in 6 months. Every night she lay awake, replaying that February evening, wondering what she could have done differently, how she could have protected her son better. Her mother, Patricia Morrison, held Elijah's hand as they walked through the metal detectors. The little boy clutched his teddy bear, his eyes fixed on the floor. He was wearing his nice clothes, the outfit they'd bought specifically for court appearances. Sarah had let him pick the shirt himself at Target, hopping for even a smile. He'd pointed at the red dinosaur shirt without expression, and she'd bought it without question. "You doing okay, sweetie?" Patricia asked Elijah softly. No response, just the sound of his small sneakers on polished floors. Jennifer Martinez, the victim advocate, met them in the lobby. She'd been assigned to their case from the beginning, a steady presence through the chaos. "Morning, Sarah. Hey there, Elijah." She knelt down to his level. "I have the playroom all set up for you, lots of new toys." Elijah looked at her briefly, then away. His grip on the teddy bear tightened. In the courthouse cafeteria, Detective Stevens grabbed coffee before his shift. Bruno sat beside him, drawing smiles from the early morning crowd. An elderly woman asked to pet him. Stevens gave the okay, and Bruno sat patiently, accepting the attention with grace while maintaining his professional demeanor. "What a good boy," the woman cooed. "Is he working today?" "Security detail for a family court hearing," Stevens replied. "Family court?" She looked surprised. "Don't they usually have those friendly therapy dogs for that?" Stevens smiled slightly. Bruno's multi-talented. If only she knew how true that was. By 9:30 a.m. the courtroom began filling. Sarah sat in the second row, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. Her lawyer, Amanda Chen, no relation to Dr. Rebecca Chen, reviewed notes at the prosecutor's table. Amanda was 38, sharp as a tack, and deeply invested in this case. She had 2 kids of her own and couldn't fathom what Sarah had endured. Marcus Bennett arrived with his public defender, Gerald Hutchins. Marcus had cleaned up for court, freshly shaved, suit pressed, the picture of rehabilitation. He'd completed an anger management course, attended 3 AA meetings, had a job lined up at his brother's contracting company. On paper, he looked like a man who'd turned his life around. But Sarah saw through it. She'd seen this performance before during their relationship. The apologies, the promises, the temporary changes that never lasted. She knew the real Marcus, the one who emerged after a few drinks, who saw her as property, who traumatized their son so badly he couldn't speak. Stevens and Bruno took their position near the judge's chamber's entrance. From there, they had a clear view of the entire courtroom. Bruno sat at attention, his eyes scanning the room with professional assessment. When Marcus entered, the dog's ears pricked forward slightly, but he remained still. Stevens noted it. Bruno's radar was active. Judge Rodriguez entered at 9:47 a.m. exactly. All rise. The formalities began. Case number read aloud. Parties identified. The judge's preliminary remarks about the seriousness of custody matters and the court's commitment to the child's best interests. Then the testimony started. Amanda Chen called Dr. Rebecca Chen to the stand first. The psychologist had been working with Elijah since March, seeing him twice weekly. She testified about selective mutism, explaining it to the court in terms everyone could understand. "Selective mutism is not a choice," Dr. Chen explained, her voice professional but compassionate. "It's a psychological response to severe trauma. Elijah's brain is protecting him the only way it knows how, by shutting down his ability to vocalize. He wants to speak, but he can't." "Can't or won't?" Hutchins challenged during cross-examination. "Can't," Dr. Chen said firmly. "This isn't defiance or manipulation. This is survival." She described their sessions, the play therapy, the art therapy, the gradual progress that wasn't really progress. Elijah would draw pictures, always the same themes: dark rooms, closed doors, a small figure hiding, red crayon marks that might have been blood or might have been nothing at all. "Has he communicated anything about that night?" Amanda asked. "Non-verbally, yes. His drawings are consistent with witnessing domestic violence. The trauma is evident in every session." Sarah wept quietly in her seat. Patricia handed her tissues that quickly became soaked. Next came Officer Jennifer Walsh, who'd responded to the initial call. She described the scene: the apartment in disarray, Sarah's injuries, Marcus's intoxicated belligerence, and Elijah, hidden in the closet, silent even when found. In my 15 years responding to domestic calls, I've never seen a child that traumatized, Walsh testified. The look in his eyes, she paused, collecting herself. It still haunts me. The morning dragged on. Character witnesses for Marcus, his brother, his AA sponsor, his anger management counselor. They painted a picture of redemption. A man who'd hit rock bottom and was clawing his way back. A father who deserved a second chance. Amanda countered with Sarah's testimony. She took the stand at 11:20 a.m., her voice shaking but determined. "Tell the court about your son before February 14th, Amanda prompted. Sarah's face softened with memory. He was so happy, so talkative, he narrated everything he did. "I'm putting on my shoes, Mama. Now I'm tying them. Look, I did it." Every single moment had commentary. Her voice broke. He sang constantly, made up songs about everything, dragons and dinosaurs and his favorite foods. And after that night, nothing. Sarah's tears flowed freely now. 6 months of silence. I've begged him to talk, promised him he's safe, told him I love him a million times, but he just stares at me with these empty eyes and She couldn't continue. The lunch recess came at 12:15 p.m. Judge Rodriguez announced they'd resume at 1:30 p.m. The courtroom emptied slowly, everyone emotionally exhausted. Sarah immediately headed to the children's waiting room where Elijah had spent the morning. Jennifer had stayed with him, playing quietly, trying to maintain normalcy. When Sarah entered, Elijah was sitting on the floor with building blocks, methodically stacking them into towers only to knock them down. "Hey, baby," Sarah said softly, sitting beside him. "How are you doing?" Elijah glanced at her, then back to his blocks. Stack, knock down, stack, knock down, a repetitive motion that seemed to soothe him. Sarah fought back fresh tears. 6 months and every interaction was still this one-sided. She talked, he listened, or maybe he didn't, she couldn't tell anymore. "We'll get lunch in a bit, okay? Grandma brought your favorite mac and cheese." No response. Stevens and Bruno walked past the waiting room door during their patrol of the hallway. Through the small window, Bruno's head turned. His ears perked forward with that distinctive attention that Stevens had learned to recognize. "What is it, boy?" Stevens murmured. Bruno whined softly. That sound again. The one that indicated interest, concern, something beyond standard security protocol. The dog's eyes were fixed on the small figure inside the room, on Elijah, sitting with his blocks, trapped in his silent world. Stevens checked his watch. 1 hour and 15 minutes until court resumed. Enough time to grab lunch, take Bruno for a quick walk around the courthouse grounds. But Bruno didn't want to move. He stood there, staring through that window as if he could see something Stevens couldn't. Some invisible wound that needed tending. "Come on, buddy, let's get you some water." Reluctantly, Bruno followed. But twice during their patrol, the dog tried to lead Stevens back to that hallway, back to that door, back to that little boy who couldn't speak. At 1:25 p.m., everyone reconvened. The afternoon session would bring more testimony, more evidence, more legal arguments about supervised visitation versus termination of parental rights. But none of that would matter. Because at 1:47 p.m., Judge Rodriguez would call for a brief recess. Sarah would ask to check on Elijah. Stevens and Bruno would provide security escort down that hallway. And everything was about to change. The miracle was 18 minutes away. The afternoon testimony had been brutal. Amanda Chen presented photographs, evidence Sarah wished didn't exist. Pictures of her bruised face from that February night. Medical reports documenting injuries. Timeline reconstructions showing a pattern of escalating violence that Sarah had tried so hard to hide. At 1:47 p.m., Judge Rodriguez removed her glasses and rubbed her temples. The weight of this case pressed down on everyone in the room. She could see it in the slumped shoulders of the court reporter, the tight expression on the bailiff's face, the way even the lawyers looked drained. "We'll take a 15-minute recess," she announced, her voice carrying the fatigue of someone who'd seen too much human suffering. "Reconvene at 2:15. The gavel's crack echoed through the courtroom. Sarah stood immediately, her only thought getting to Elijah. Patricia squeezed her hand. "Go check on him, honey. I'll be right here." Sarah's heels clicked rapidly across the marble floor as she headed toward the children's wing. Her heart ached with the familiar grief of knowing she'd walk into that room, and her son would look at her with those hollow eyes. 6 months of this. 6 months of one-sided conversations and desperate hope that slowly eroded into acceptance of a reality she couldn't change. Detective Stevens noticed her trajectory and moved to intercept. "Ma'am, I'll escort you." Standard protocol for family court cases with domestic violence histories. He fell into step beside her, Bruno at his left heel. They walked in silence down the corridor. Stevens could feel the tension radiating from the woman beside him, a mother's anguish that needed no words. Bruno, as always, sensed it too. The dog's ears were forward, his pace matching Stevens perfectly, but his focus wasn't on perimeter security. It was on the door ahead, room 7, the children's waiting area. 20 feet from the door, Bruno's behavior shifted. His nostrils flared, processing something beyond Stevens' human perception. The dog's entire body language changed, muscles tensing, attention laser-focused, that soft whine building in his throat. "Easy," Stevens murmured, though he was already loosening his grip on the leash slightly. After 3 years of partnership, he'd learned to trust Bruno's instincts. When the dog sensed something, it mattered. Through the door's rectangular window, they could see Jennifer sitting on a small chair, reviewing paperwork. And there on the floor was Elijah. He'd abandoned the blocks. Now he simply sat cross-legged, his teddy bear in his lap, staring at nothing. But tears streamed down his small face. Silent tears. No sobbing, no sound, just water tracking down his cheeks as if his body was crying without his permission. Sarah gasped when she saw, "Oh, baby." Stevens opened the door, intending to let Sarah through first, but Bruno had other plans. The moment the door cracked open, the German Shepherd pulled forward with gentle but insistent pressure. Not the aggressive pull of detecting a threat, something entirely different. Something Stevens had seen twice before, in moments that defied his tactical training. Bruno was responding to a child in pain. "Bruno, heel," Stevens commanded, but his heart wasn't in it. He felt that familiar internal debate, protocol versus instinct, his dog's instinct. Bruno looked back at him, and Stevens would swear later that the dog's expression held something almost like pleading. "Let me help." Jennifer stood up uncertain. Sarah froze in the doorway, the moment suspended, balanced on a knife's edge. Stevens made a decision that would change everything. He loosened the leash completely. "Okay, boy, slow." Bruno moved forward with the careful precision of someone approaching something precious and fragile. His powerful body, trained for takedowns and suspect apprehension, transformed into something gentle, protective. His head lowered slightly, his approach angle non-threatening, every movement broadcasting safety. Elijah didn't look up, didn't seem to notice the 85-pound German Shepherd approaching him. His tears continued falling, silent and devastating, onto the teddy bear's worn fur. Bruno reached the child and simply stopped. For 10 seconds the dog stood there, 3 feet away, as if asking permission from someone who couldn't grant it. Then, with movements so careful they seemed choreographed, Bruno lowered himself to the floor. He lay down beside Elijah, not touching, just present. The room held its collective breath. Sarah's hand covered her mouth. Stephen stood perfectly still, his professional training warring with the lump forming in his throat. Jennifer gripped her clipboard so tightly her knuckles whitened. 30 seconds passed, 45 a minute. Then Bruno did something extraordinary. He inched forward, barely 6 inches, and slowly, so slowly it seemed to take forever, he laid his massive head across Elijah's lap. The weight was significant enough to be noticed, but gentle enough not to startle. The dog's dark eyes looked up at the child's face with an expression that could only be described as understanding. "I know you're hurting, I'm here, you're safe." Elijah's tears stopped. Not gradually, they just stopped as if someone had flipped a switch. His body went very still, his blue eyes, vacant for so long, focused on the dog in his lap. Time crystallized. Every person in that room felt it, that sense of standing on the precipice of something profound. Sarah pressed her fist against her mouth to stifle the sob building in her chest. "Don't move. Don't breathe. Don't break whatever spell this is." Elijah's left hand still held his teddy bear. His right hand, small and pale, lifted slowly, trembling. The movement of someone who'd forgotten how to reach out and was remembering, neuron by neuron, how human connection worked. His fingers hovered above Bruno's head. The dog remained perfectly still, barely breathing, as if he understood the monumental courage this small gesture required. Contact, fingertips touching fur, soft, warm, real. Elijah's fingers pressed down, feeling the solid reality of Bruno beneath them. His hand moved slowly through the dog's coat, exploring, testing, connecting with something outside himself for the first time in 183 days. Bruno's tail moved, just once, a single wag that said, "Yes, I'm real, you're okay." And then, Elijah's lips moved. Sarah saw it first. Her sharp intake of breath made Stevens glance at her, then back at the child. Jennifer leaned forward, disbelieving. The little boy's mouth formed shapes. His voice, unused for half a year, tried to remember its purpose. His vocal cords, trained into silence by trauma, attempted to function again. The first sound was barely a breath, a whisper so faint it might have been imagination. Then, Bruno's eyes remained fixed on Elijah's face, steady, encouraging, "Keep going, you can do this." "Nai." The word built, syllable by agonizing syllable. Elijah's hand pressed into Bruno's fur as if drawing strength from the contact. His eyes, no longer vacant, filled with something that might have been hope, or might have been wonder, or might have been the first crack in a wall built by terror. "Nice." Sarah's tears came in a flood she couldn't control. Her baby was speaking. "Nice, Dogjai." 2 words, 7 letters, 2 syllables that shattered 6 months of silence and echoed through that small room like a symphony. "Nice doggy." The dam broke. Sarah fell to her knees beside her son, sobbing so hard she couldn't breathe. "Yes, yes, baby, nice doggy, oh, sweetheart." Elijah looked at his mother, and for the first time since February 14th, his eyes weren't empty. They held recognition, presence, life. "Nice doggy," he repeated, his voice slightly stronger, as if testing out this miraculous rediscovered ability. His hand continued stroking Bruno's fur, the physical connection anchoring him to reality, to safety, to a world where he could speak again. Stevens turned away, swiping quickly at his eyes. In 15 years of law enforcement, he'd seen a lot. But this was something else entirely. His extraordinary partner had just accomplished what months of therapy couldn't. Bruno had given a traumatized child his voice back. Jennifer's clipboard clattered to the floor, forgotten. She stood with both hands over her heart, witnessing what she would later describe as the most beautiful moment of her 20-year career. Bruno, for his part, remained perfectly still in Elijah's lap, accepting the child's touch, his presence radiating the calm certainty that everything would be okay now. The dog had found the broken thing and helped it begin to heal. That was enough. "Nice doggy," Elijah said again, and this time the corners of his mouth lifted, just slightly, just barely. But it was a smile. The first smile in 6 months. The miracle had happened in room 7 of the Oakland County Courthouse. And nothing would ever be the same. Jennifer Martinez's hands shook as she dialed Judge Rodriguez's chambers. Protocol demanded immediate notification when something significant occurred during recess. And this was beyond significant. This was unprecedented. Your Honor, you need to come to room 7, now. Her voice cracked with emotion. Elijah Bennett just spoke. There was a pause on the other end. He what? He spoke 3 words to the police dog. Judge Rodriguez was already moving. She'd presided over family court for 23 years and thought she'd seen everything. Clearly, she'd been wrong. She grabbed her robe and headed down the corridor at a pace that made her clerk look up in alarm. In room 7, the scene remained frozen in its miraculous tableau. Elijah sat with Bruno's head in his lap, his small hand continuing to stroke the dog's fur in repetitive, soothing motions. Sarah knelt beside them, tears streaming down her face, afraid to speak, afraid to break whatever magic had descended on this moment. "Nice doggy," Elijah whispered again, as if confirming to himself that the words still worked, that his voice was truly his again. Stephen stood near the door, one hand on the frame to steady himself. He'd witnessed Bruno's gift before, but this was on another level entirely. He pulled out his phone and quickly texted his lieutenant. "You won't believe what just happened. Bruno got the kid to talk." The response came immediately. "The mute kid? Are you serious?" "Dead serious. The kid is speaking." Judge Rodriguez appeared in the doorway, slightly breathless. She stopped short, taking in the scene. The child, the dog, the mother in tears, the profound peace that seemed to radiate from the center of the room where boy and animal connected. "Dear God," she murmured. Stephen stepped aside to let her enter. "Your Honor, it happened about 5 minutes ago, first words in 6 months." The judge moved slowly, carefully, understanding instinctively that this moment was as fragile as spun glass. She knelt down several feet from Elijah, maintaining distance, and spoke in the softest voice her courtroom had never heard. "Hello, Elijah. I'm Judge Rodriguez. Can you tell me about your friend?" Elijah looked at her, actually looked at her, his eyes focused and present, his hand stilled on Bruno's head. For a moment, everyone thought the spell would break, that he'd retreat back into silence. Then Bruno. His voice was scratchy from disuse but clear. "His name is Bruno." Sarah made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. Stevens felt his throat tighten. The judge's eyes widened. "That's right," she said gently. "Bruno is a very special dog." "Nice doggy," Elijah confirmed, his standard descriptor apparently becoming his anchor phrase. Judge Rodriguez stood slowly, her mind already racing through implications and possibilities. She gestured for Stevens and Jennifer to step into the hallway. Sarah stayed with Elijah, unwilling to leave, afraid that if she moved, her son would stop talking. In the corridor, the judge's demeanor shifted from amazed to analytical. "This changes everything. We need Dr. Chen here immediately, and we need to figure out what happens next." The afternoon session, Jennifer began. "Will be delayed," Judge Rodriguez said firmly. "This is more important." She looked at Stevens. "Your dog just accomplished something months of therapy couldn't. I need to understand what we're dealing with." Stevens shook his head, still processing. "I've seen Bruno connect with traumatized kids before, Your Honor, but nothing like this. He just knew. He sensed something and went to help." "Is he trained as a therapy dog?" "No, ma'am. He's full patrol. Narcotics detection, tracking, apprehension. But he has this gift with children in distress." Jennifer was already on her phone calling Dr. Rebecca Chen. "Doctor, Jennifer Martinez from the courthouse. You need to come back immediately," she listened. Elijah spoke. I know, please hurry." Judge Rodriguez paced the hallway, her legal mind working through unprecedented territory. a police K-9 in family court proceedings, an emotional support animal that wasn't officially certified for that purpose, a breakthrough that could fundamentally alter the case's trajectory. "If we bring them back into the courtroom," she said slowly, thinking aloud, "and the child regresses." "But if we don't," Stevens countered, "and we lose this opportunity." The judge nodded. He was right. This was a choice between protecting protocol and protecting a child's fragile recovery. The answer should have been obvious, but the legal implications were staggering. Dr. Chen arrived within 8 minutes, having broken several traffic laws to get there. She burst through the courthouse entrance, barely pausing for security, and ran down the corridor. Jennifer met her at the door to room 7. "Slowly," Jennifer warned. "He's still talking, but we don't want to overwhelm him." Dr. Chen entered to find her patient, her silent, traumatized patient, sitting on the floor having a conversation with a German shepherd. "Bruno is big," Elijah was saying softly, "but nice, not scary." "That's right," Sarah encouraged, her voice thick with tears. "He's a helper dog." "Helper dog," Elijah repeated, testing the phrase. Dr. Chen remained in the doorway, observing with professional assessment overlaying her personal amazement. She watched Elijah's body language, relaxed, engaged, connected. She noted his hand maintaining contact with the dog, using that tactile anchor to stay present. She observed his eye contact, his verbal responses, the animation returning to features that had been blank for half a year. After 5 minutes of careful observation, she stepped into the hallway where Judge Rodriguez waited. "Well," the judge asked. Dr. Chen chose her words carefully. "From a psychological standpoint, what I just witnessed is remarkable. The dog has created a bridge, a safe connection that's allowing Elijah to access language again. The question is whether we can maintain that connection in a way that serves the case. Can we bring the dog into the courtroom?" "I think we must," Dr. Chen said firmly. "If there's any chance Elijah could provide testimony, even minimal, it would be with that dog present. Without Bruno, I believe he'll retreat back into mutism. The animal has become his emotional lifeline." Judge Rodriguez turned to Stevens. "Would your dog be able to handle courtroom duty while providing comfort to the child?" Stevens looked through the window at his partner still lying peacefully with Elijah. "Yes, Your Honor. If any dog can do both, Bruno can." "The defense will object," Jennifer pointed out. "They'll claim it's prejudicial, manipulative, coaching the witness." "Let them object," Judge Rodriguez said, her voice hardening into the tone that had silenced countless lawyers. "I'll cite Michigan Court Rule 2.511 regarding accommodation for vulnerable witnesses. I'll reference the Americans with Disabilities Act. I'll pull every precedent for courtroom therapy dogs if I have to. That child deserves to be heard." Amanda Chen, the prosecutor, had been summoned and now joined the hallway conference. Her eyes widened as the situation was explained. "You're going to allow a police dog to serve as an emotional support animal for a 3-year-old witness?" "Yes," the judge said simply. "That's," Amanda paused, then smiled. "That's brilliant, but we need to be strategic. We can't make it look like we're trying to manipulate the situation." Dr. Chen nodded. "The approach should be gentle, simple yes or no questions. Let Elijah maintain contact with the dog, don't push him. Even a few words could be significant." Stevens cleared his throat. "Bruno will need a short break first. Water, bathroom, and I should brief him, not that he needs it but it's protocol." Judge Rodriguez checked her watch. 2:23 p.m. The recess had stretched well beyond 15 minutes. The courtroom would be buzzing with speculation. "We reconvene at 3 o'clock, she decided. "That gives everyone time to prepare. Detective Stevens, get your partner ready. Dr. Chen, I want you in the courtroom. Amanda, prepare limited, age-appropriate questions. Jennifer, work with Sarah, make sure she understands what's happening." As the group dispersed, The judge paused at the door to room 7. Through the window, she watched Elijah lean against Bruno, the dog accepting the weight with patient grace. The child was talking. She couldn't hear the words, but she could see his lips moving, see the life returning to his eyes. 23 years of family court, thousands of cases, countless shattered families and traumatized children. And now this, a miracle in the form of a German shepherd with an unexplainable gift. Judge Rodriguez allowed herself a small smile. Sometimes justice needed 4 paws. She turned toward her chambers to prepare for the most unusual afternoon session of her career. At 3:00 p.m., the courtroom doors opened and an unprecedented sight unfolded. Detective Stevens entered first, Bruno at his side. But this time, they weren't taking their security position by the wall. They walked down the center aisle toward a small table that had been set up near the witness stand, child-sized, with a soft blue chair and a cup of juice waiting. The gallery buzzed with confusion. Marcus Bennett sat forward, frowning. His attorney, Gerald Hutchins, immediately rose. "Your Honor, what is this?" Judge Rodriguez settled into her seat with a calm that belied the revolutionary nature of what was about to happen. "Mr. Hutchins, we've had a significant development during recess. I'm prepared to hear your objections, but let me explain the situation first." Sarah entered next, holding Elijah's hand. The change in the child was visible to everyone who'd seen him that morning. His eyes, while still uncertain, held focus. His grip on his teddy bear seemed less desperate, and most remarkably, when he saw Bruno, his face brightened. "Bruno," the word carried across the courtroom. Elijah pulled toward the dog. A collective gasp rippled through the gallery. The court reporter's hands froze above her keys. Marcus Bennett's mouth fell open. "The child spoke," someone whispered. Judge Rodriguez allowed Elijah to reach Bruno before calling order. The boy wrapped his arms around the dog's neck, and Bruno stood perfectly still, accepting the embrace with the patience of a saint. Stevens felt his chest swell with pride in his remarkable partner. "Your Honor," Hutchins tried again, "I must object too." "Noted," Judge Rodriguez cut him off. "Let me explain. During recess, Elijah Bennett spoke his first words in 6 months. This breakthrough occurred in the presence of K-9 Officer Bruno. Dr. Rebecca Chen, the child's treating psychologist, has advised that Elijah may be able to provide limited testimony if the dog remains with him. I'm allowing it under Michigan Court Rule 2.511, which permits special accommodations for vulnerable witnesses. This is highly irregular. This entire case is irregular, counsel." The judge's tone brooked no argument. "I'm exercising my discretion to create an environment where a traumatized 3-year-old might possibly communicate with this court. You may lodge your objections for the record, but my ruling stands." Hutchins looked at Marcus, who shook his head sharply. "Your Honor, this is prejudicial. A police dog with the child creates an intimidating atmosphere for my client." "Your client should have thought about that before he traumatized his son into silence," Judge Rodriguez said flatly. "Objection overruled. Sit down, Mr. Hutchins." The courtroom fell silent. This was a side of Judge Rodriguez rarely seen, the protective fury of someone who dedicated her career to defending children. Dr. Chen took a seat in the front row, positioned where Elijah could see her if needed. Amanda Chen stood at the prosecutor's table, a single sheet of paper in her hands. She'd spent the last 30 minutes crafting 6 simple questions, 6 questions that might change everything. Stevens guided Bruno to the small table and had the dog lie down beside the child-sized chair. Elijah sat down, his hand immediately finding Bruno's fur. The contact seemed to ground him, to remind him he was safe. Jennifer Martinez sat on Elijah's other side, close but not hovering. Judge Rodriguez had set up the space to feel as non-threatening as possible. No witness stand, no microphone, no formal positioning that might frighten a toddler. "Elijah," Judge Rodriguez said softly, her grandmotherly voice emerging, the one she reserved for the youngest witnesses, do you know why you're here today? Elijah looked at her and nodded. Can you use words, sweetheart, for the court? His eyes dropped to Bruno. His fingers tightened in the dog's fur. Then, barely above a whisper, yes. The court reporter's fingers flew. That single word, officially entered into the record, carried the weight of 6 months of silence. Amanda approached slowly, kneeling to be at eye level. Hi, Elijah. My name is Ms. Chen. I want to ask you some questions. You can take your time, okay? Okay. Another word. Sarah, sitting in the gallery, covered her mouth to muffle her sobs. Patricia held her daughter's other hand so tightly her rings left impressions. Elijah, do you feel safe right now? The boy looked at Bruno, then back at Amanda. Yes, Bruno is here. That's right, Bruno is here to help you. Amanda took a breath. This next question was crucial. Elijah, do you remember the night when the police came to your house? The change was immediate. Elijah's body tensed. His breathing quickened. His hand clenched in Bruno's fur so tightly his knuckles went white. Bruno, sensing the shift, lifted his head and placed it in Elijah's lap, that same gentle gesture from room 7. The weight, the warmth, the steady presence. Elijah's breathing slowed. He nodded. Can you tell me what you remember? For a long moment, nothing. The courtroom held its collective breath. Even the air conditioning seemed to quiet, waiting. Loud, Elijah finally whispered. Very loud, scary. What was loud? Daddy, the word came out broken. Daddy was yelling. Marcus Bennett's face went red. He leaned toward Hutchins, whispering furiously, but his attorney gestured for silence. What else do you remember? Amanda asked gently. Elijah's eyes filled with tears. Mama fell down, there was red on her face. His voice grew smaller. I was scared. Where did you go when you were scared? Hiding place. His hand moved in Bruno's fur, the repetitive motion self-soothing. In the closet, behind the coats, dark there. Dr. Chen, watching from the gallery, made notes while her own eyes misted. This was textbook trauma recall, fragmented, sensory-based, but devastatingly clear. Elijah, Amanda continued, her own voice thick with emotion, were you scared of your daddy that night? The question hung in the air like a knife. Everything hinged on this answer. Elijah looked across the courtroom. His eyes found his father for the first time. Marcus stared back, and something passed between father and son, something that made the little boy shrink back against Bruno. Yes, Elijah whispered. Daddy hurt Mama, I thought he would hurt me too. The courtroom erupted. Hutchins was on his feet objecting. Marcus was shaking his head violently, pointing at Sarah, mouthing accusations. The gallery burst into murmurs. The bailiff called for order. But Judge Rodriguez only had eyes for the small boy clutching a German shepherd and crying silent tears while speaking truth that had been locked inside him for half a year. Order, her gavel cracked like thunder. Order in this court. The room fell silent. Elijah, the judge said gently, you're very brave, very, very brave. Thank you for talking to us. Can I be done now? His voice was so small, so tired. Can Bruno stay with me? Yes, sweetheart, you can be done. And Bruno can stay with you as long as you need him. Stevens helped his partner stand, and Elijah immediately wrapped his arms around the dog's neck. Jennifer guided them toward the exit, back to the safety of room 7. As they passed the defense table, Marcus tried to reach out. Son. Bruno positioned himself between Marcus and Elijah with the precision of a trained protection animal. A low rumble, not quite a growl, just a warning, emerged from his chest. Marcus pulled his hand back. They exited the courtroom, leaving behind chaos and revelation, and the echoing words of a 3-year-old who'd finally found his voice. In 17 minutes of testimony, Elijah Bennett had said 43 words. 43 words that changed everything. Judge Rodriguez delivered her ruling 45 minutes after Elijah left the courtroom. Her voice was steady, judicial, but those who knew her could hear the underlying steel. In the matter of Bennett versus Bennett, this court finds that unsupervised visitation is not in the best interest of the minor child. Supervised visitation only, 1 hour per week, at a neutral facility with a court-appointed monitor present. The father will continue mandatory counseling and anger management. This arrangement will be reviewed in 6 months. She looked directly at Marcus Bennett. Mr. Bennett, your son was so traumatized by your actions that he stopped speaking for half a year. He testified today with extraordinary courage about his fear. Children don't lie about fear. I suggest you spend your visitation time earning back trust you destroyed. The gavel fell. Marcus's face went purple with rage, but Hutchins held him back from an outburst that would have worsened everything. Sarah collapsed in relief, sobbing into her mother's shoulder. 6 months of terror that Marcus would get unsupervised access, that she'd have to send her baby back into danger. It was over. Not forever, but for now. For now, they were safe. In room 7, Elijah sat with Bruno talking, actually talking. The words came slowly, still tentative, but they came. "Do you chase bad guys?" he asked the dog. Bruno's tail wagged as if answering yes. "Are you strong?" Another wag. Stevens leaned against the doorframe, watching. Jennifer sat nearby, documenting everything, but even her professional demeanor had cracked. She kept wiping her eyes. Dr. Chen arrived with news of the ruling. She knelt beside Elijah. "Your mama is going to be so happy. You were very brave today." "Bruno helped," Elijah said simply. "He's my friend." "He is," Dr. Chen agreed. "A very special friend." That's when Stevens made a decision that went against every protocol in his 15-year career. He pulled out his phone and called his lieutenant. "Sir, I need to request something unusual, very unusual." 3 days later, a new arrangement was established. Every Wednesday at 4 p.m., Sarah would bring Elijah to the police station for unofficial therapy sessions. Stevens had cleared it with his supervisors, the department's legal team, and everyone else who needed to sign off. Bruno wasn't a certified therapy dog, but the K9 unit agreed to make an exception. The first visit was tentative. Elijah held his mother's hand tightly as they entered the station. But when he saw Bruno waiting in the K9 training yard, his face transformed. "Bruno!" The dog trotted over, tail wagging, greeting the boy like an old friend. Within minutes, Elijah was sitting in the grass, telling Bruno about his week. Stevens sat nearby, ostensibly supervising but mostly just watching the magic happen again. "I went to preschool. Miss Amy was happy I talked. I told her about you." Bruno listened with those intelligent eyes, head cocked, occasionally licking Elijah's hand. "Mama says I'm brave. Are you brave?" Stevens smiled. "Bruno is very brave. He helps people." "He helped me," Elijah said matter-of-factly. "I was stuck. He unstuck me." Over the following weeks, Elijah's progress was remarkable. He returned to regular preschool, talking to his teachers and classmates. His vocabulary exploded, making up for lost time. The nightmares didn't stop completely, but they lessened. Sarah would hear him in his room sometimes, talking to his teddy bear about Bruno, about being brave, about not being scared anymore. Dr. Chen incorporated animal-assisted therapy principles into their sessions, though she admitted Bruno had already accomplished the breakthrough. "Your dog did in 5 minutes what I couldn't do in 6 months, she told Stevens during one of Elijah's visits. "He's extraordinary." "He knows when kids are hurting," Stevens said. "Always has." The Wednesday visits became sacred. Elijah would count down the days. 3 more days until Bruno. 2 more days until Bruno. Tomorrow is Bruno Day. Sarah would drive him to the station and he'd run, actually run, with the enthusiasm of a normal 4-year-old to find his friend. By Christmas, 9 months after that February night, Elijah was speaking in complete sentences, laughing, playing, living. The hollow look had left his eyes. He still attended therapy, still had hard days when the memories surfaced, but he was healing. He also had a new ambition. "When I'm big," he told Stevens one Wednesday, "I want to be a police officer with a dog, like you and Bruno." Stevens felt his throat tighten. "That's a great goal, buddy." "Bruno saved me. I want to save people too." The supervised visitations with Marcus were difficult. Marcus tried in his way, but Elijah remained wary, always asking if his mother was nearby, always watching the clock until the hour ended. The relationship was damaged, perhaps irreparably, but at least Elijah could speak now. Could say, "I don't like when you yell and that scares me." Having a voice gave him power. 3 years passed. Elijah turned 6, then 7. The Wednesday visits continued, though less frequently as he grew more independent. Bruno aged 2, 9, then 10. The big German shepherd moved a bit slower, his muzzle going gray, but his connection with Elijah never diminished. On Elijah's 7th birthday, Sarah threw a party at their new apartment, far from the old place, far from bad memories. Elijah had invited his entire first-grade class. 23 rambunctious 7-year-olds hopped up on cake and excitement. But one guest was special. At 2 p.m., Stevens arrived with Bruno. The dog wore a ridiculous birthday hat that Sarah had purchased specifically for the occasion, blue with silver stars. Bruno tolerated it with the dignity of someone who'd earned the right to look silly. "Bruno!" Elijah shrieked, running across the yard. The other children followed, all wanting to meet the famous dog. Stevens supervised as 23 children gently petted Bruno, asking a million questions. But periodically, Elijah would return, wrapping his arms around the dog's neck, needing that connection. "You came to my party," he whispered into Bruno's fur. The dog's tail wagged steadily. During cake, Elijah stood up, completely unprompted, and announced to everyone, "Bruno is my hero. When I was really sad and couldn't talk, he helped me. He's the best dog in the whole world." The adults exchanged glances, eyes misting. The children cheered, not fully understanding but sensing something important. Later, as the party wound down, Stevens found Sarah on the porch. She handed him a beer. "I don't know how to thank you," she said quietly. "You and Bruno gave me my son back." Stevens shook his head. "Bruno did that, I just hold the leash." "Still, thank you for the visits, for understanding, for letting a little boy love your dog." They watched Elijah in the yard, playing tag with his friends, his laughter carrying on the spring breeze. A normal 7-year-old, happy, whole, healed not completely. Healing was never complete, but healed enough. Bruno lay in the shade, watching the children with patient eyes, that same gentle presence that had unlocked a silent child's voice 3 years ago. "You know what Elijah told me last week," Sarah said, smiling through tears. "He said when he grows up, he wants to have a dog just like Bruno, so he can help other kids who are stuck." Stevens felt warmth spread through his chest. That kid's going to change the world. He already changed mine. As the sun set over the birthday party, as children laughed and played, as a German shepherd rested peacefully in the grass, something beautiful existed in that moment. Proof that healing was possible, that hope survived trauma, that sometimes the best medicine came with 4 paws, a wagging tail, and unconditional love. Elijah ran over one more time, breathless from playing, and threw himself against Bruno for a hug. "I love you, Bruno." The dog licked his face, and if animals could smile, Bruno was definitely smiling. Some wounds never fully heal. Some scars remain forever. But love, patient, steadfast, unconditional love, can reach into the darkest places and bring light. That February night 3 years ago, a 3-year-old boy's voice was stolen by trauma. But on a September morning in a courthouse waiting room, a remarkable dog gave it back. And in the years that followed, that boy learned what it meant to be brave, to heal, to hope. All because once upon a time, A German shepherd named Bruno knew exactly what a broken child needed. Not words, not therapy, not explanations. Just presence, just patience, just love. Sometimes that's all it takes to save a life. The end.